Texas Defender Service is a nonprofit law firm with offices in Houston and Austin. We were created in 1995, and our goal is to establish a fair and just criminal justice system in Texas. We seek to do that by preventing unfair use of the death penalty. We also work for reforms that improve the indigent defense system as a whole. This includes the creation of public defender offices and better standards for court-appointed counsel. Our long-term goal is to improve Texas's criminal justice system, and especially its indigent defense system. Over the short term, we actively work to prevent the unfair use of the death penalty in Texas. Because we're a legal services organization, we seek to meet this goal by training capital defense lawyers and consulting with trial teams. We also work to ensure that death row inmates receive quality legal representation in their post-conviction appeals. As a result of our work, both death sentences and executions have dropped dramatically in Texas. To reach our goals, we need diversified, stable funding that will allow us to hire more staff and increase the reach of our legal services. Texas Defender Service is effective for so many reasons. First of all, we have close relationships with lawyers, mitigation specialists, investigators, and expert witnesses. Second, we regularly train capital defense teams, and each year we provide intensive consulting for more than 200 cases. Third, we provide preliminary mitigation investigation in cases that are likely to end in a death verdict. These investigations give defense teams a head start in preparing an effective defense. This is a critical component of our work because every completed case with a preliminary mitigation investigation has avoided the death penalty. We also consult in post-conviction cases and provide direct representation in select cases. We focus our direct representation in cases involving foreign nationals, individuals with mental retardation, and those who are incompetent to be executed. Texas Defender Service engages in crisis case assistance when an execution is scheduled. And finally, we're known as experts on high-quality defense representation. We regularly participate in the development, expansion, and assessment of public defender programs throughout Texas. Texas Defender Service is effective because we don't just tell people what to do, we do it ourselves. Every practice that we recommend for capital defense teams, our staff carries out in our own cases. Texas lawyers know our strategies work because they see us using them and having success. We believe in problem solving and in being ahead of the curve in tackling problems. For instance, when the Supreme Court outlawed the execution of people with mental retardation, we began systematically reviewing the cases of death row inmates. Our work led to findings of retardation for a number of death row inmates that has changed the course of their lives. Also, when we see a systemic problem, we consider how to fix it through our policy work in state government and at the Texas legislature. Early on, we saw the need for better standards for court-appointed capital defense attorneys. So we worked with the State Bar of Texas to create guidelines and standards for capital defense counsel. Our most basic metrics of success are numeric. In Texas, we've contributed to a historic reduction in death sentences over the 12 years that our capital trial project has existed. In 1999, the year before our trial project started, Texas sent 48 people to death row. In 2010 and 2011, Texas handed down only 8 new death sentences, which was the lowest it's been in 30 years. Our post-conviction project also has caused a great reduction in executions. In 2011, Texas executed 13 people, the lowest number in 15 years. We also measure our success qualitatively. When policymakers have questions about improving indigent defense delivery, they come to us. For that reason, we've been involved in creating and supporting the Regional Public Defender for capital cases, the statewide Office of Capital Writs, and the Harris County Public Defender Office. Some people assume we're a public defender office and are funded by state or local tax dollars. That's just not true. We aren't a public defender, and we don't receive grants or general operating funding from the federal or state governments. Others assume that we receive money from the Legal Services Corporation, which funds some civil legal services programs in Texas. Although capital post-conviction cases in the federal courts and clemency efforts are considered to be civil in nature, we aren't eligible for Legal Services Corporation funding. Finally, some people think we focus only on death penalty issues. However, our mission is much broader than that. We're fundamentally concerned with the fairness of the criminal justice system as a whole. We address the death penalty because this is where indigent defense failures are the most perverse and magnified. Our efforts to build a more fair and just criminal defense system apply to all criminal cases. We're proud to prevent executions in unjust circumstances. For instance, we won a stay of execution for Charles Dean Hood by showing the courts that the judge and prosecutor in his case were having a sexual affair with one another. We also won a new punishment trial for Ricky Eugene Kerr when we proved that his original trial lawyers never investigated his life history. Then we got Daniel Angel Plata's death sentence commuted to life after we showed he had mental retardation. We've also won cases in the Supreme Court that make us proud. For instance, the Supreme Court overturned Thomas Millerell's death sentence after we proved that the prosecution engaged in racially biased jury selection. We also persuaded the Supreme Court to stop Scott Pinetti's execution after we showed that Mr. Pinetti didn't know why he was being executed. On top of our court successes, we've also helped persuade the State Licensing Board for Psychologists to ban a notorious expert from performing further mental retardation evaluations in capital cases. It's challenging in Texas to prevent the unfair use of the death penalty while also representing the interests of the criminally accused. Unsurprisingly, some people associate us with our clients' crimes. And although we're not an abolitionist organization, our efforts to reduce the unfair use of the death penalty causes some donors to assume that we are. It's also challenging and expensive to provide quality legal services, even when we pay our staff at well below market rates. We do seek to be paid by the courts when we're appointed, but the law doesn't require them to pay our legal fees and expenses in full. Too often, we're not even reimbursed enough to cover our overhead. Because the lawyers we serve are court-appointed, they too are poorly paid and unable to provide significant monetary support for our work. Texas Defender Service needs to build a more stable and diversified funding base. More financial assistance would help us focus on development in this area, which currently gets overtaken by our legal work. Additional resources would also allow us to create a sizable rainy day fund. We know we need to bank a significant percentage of our annual income so that we have a buffer against tough financial times when they come. We also need more full-time post-conviction attorneys to perform crisis case consulting and to represent our clients. There are more than 300 men and women on death row, and Texas continues to execute at a higher rate than other states. We get many more requests for help from attorneys and death row inmates than we have the capacity to take on. And finally, significant additional resources would also allow us to roll back salary cuts and hire more support staff. We'd like to fill the early intervention gap that currently exists in Texas. We've tried to close it with our preliminary mitigation investigation project, But Texas files between 200 and 300 new capital cases annually, and we have only one licensed master social worker assigned to this project. Currently, she works on approximately 20 high-risk cases annually. If we hired more mitigation specialists, we could help more trial teams. Based on our success so far with this program, we know we would prevent greater numbers of cases from going to trial as death penalty cases. Severe mental illness is a significant occurrence among capital defendants. We want to create a special team to consult with others who provide motions and briefs and help with litigating issues that arise when a client is mentally ill and facing trial or execution. Currently, such help doesn't exist. The good news is that we can change the criminal justice system for the better. With your support, TDS can reduce unfair use of the death penalty and improve the state's indigent defense system. Please, invest in our work.